Hi, guys. I don't know why I put this picture up here. My talk is about revision, and I wanted to start with one of my favorite revisions of all time. It happened this summer. It's so amazing. This woman saw this fresco. It used to look like that, and it had deteriorated. So she decided to restore it until it looked like a monkey with a toothache. So I want to talk about revision as part of my job. I work with a partner, Chris Miller, and the two of us are screenwriters and directors. This guy is William Goldman. He's famous for saying this among writing a bunch of great screenplays. And I wanted to bring this picture up because he looks so anxious. I can't believe how much rewriting stresses writers out. The Writers Guild of America, this is a true fact, consumes more mental health visits than any other healthcare collective in America. We are like a joke in the insurance game. And the reason is rewriting. Rewriting is really, really hard. Chris and I made this movie called 21 Jump Street, and you're not supposed to applaud. Oh no, this is eating into my time. So when we make a movie or a TV show, we like to have a table read. It's where the actors come in and they read the script out loud, and then we invite a bunch of our friends to come and tell us what they think of it so we can make it better. And the day before the table read for 21 Jump Street, I get a call from this amazing producer that we worked with that helped us make the movie, and he's amazing in part because he says things like this: "Phil, what are you doing? Why did you invite all these writers and directors to the table read? Don't you know they're all gonna have ideas?" Like, ideas are the worst thing that could happen to 21 Jump Street. And he has a really good point, which is that when you don't want to take something that's pretty good and has a few holes and turn it into something worse. He's in the business of getting movies made. And he's like, look, we're not going to win an Oscar with 21 Jump Street. Why don't we just go ahead? He also said something else that's really smart, which is I have one boss, and that's the movie. And what he means is that when you make movies or you tell stories, you become a slave to the story. And you have to check your ego at the door and bring all this humility and learn as much as you can from the audience and from your friends to make the movie as good as possible. And then if you do that enough, hopefully the movie will get better and it'll be a big success. And then everybody gets their ego back. I can never work with those guys again. So I'm going to talk to you about then going back to square one as a deliberate creative practice. And I'm going to use as an example the movie that Chris and I made first, which is called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It's based on this, I guess I'm pointing this in the wrong direction. It's based on my favorite kids' book, and it's got all these amazing set pieces in it because it's about a town where it rains food. The only thing the book doesn't have are characters and a story. Which makes it a great Hollywood movie. So Chris and I got the chance to write the screenplay for this movie, and we thought, oh, it's like a disaster movie, and disaster movies have cops and plucky reporters, and they have scientists. And wouldn't it be great to make a movie where the hero was a scientist? And wouldn't it be great if he had a pipe and a monkey for some reason? But we basically came up with this story about the greatest scientist in the world. We said, he works for the National Aeronautics and Space Bureau, NASB, and he's the best scientist in the world, and he makes a big mistake and accidentally, with one of his inventions, gives the entire world the hiccups, and he's disgraced. And a year later, we find him in a taco truck with like an Al Gore beard, and he's miserable, and he spends the whole movie basically trying to regain that past glory. So that was a pretty good start for a story, and we spent a year working on it, and it was super duper funny, and it totally got us fired because it didn't make any sense. And so then the guys who fired us were the directors that got hired, and they spent a year on it, and they basically took out all of our funny jokes and interesting stuff and revealed the gaping story flaws in our original screenplay, which was an incredible service to the movie, but not very helpful for them because they got fired as well. very shortly after. And then this is a weird twist. We got hired back to replace them, which never happens. This was not a very well-managed film. So they had really made a terrible mistake. So then we go back to square one, because on the first day, they put us in a room with 40 people that the other guys hired. So this is our crew. I would say they were hostile towards us. I think that's fair. Especially because we were the guys who had written the screenplay that got the other guys fired. So we had no credibility. And our producer says, okay, this is your first meeting of the day. Tell the crew how you're going to fix the movie. And we were like, well, I'm just trying to figure out my parking space. I don't know exactly. What do you guys think? And that was the pivotal point of the entire film. Because it turns out, and I didn't know this at the time, but that being a director isn't just about mercilessly imposing your creative will on others. It's in large part about enabling the creativity of others, about creating the conditions for innovation. And when we threw out that script, what we did is we invited all these ideas in, and believe me, it was so chaotic. And it created, I don't know why I picked this poster, I just thought it was a weird poster, I don't know what language it's in. They think it's funny, though, when our monuments are destroyed, whoever it is. But we created a very chaotic environment by doing that, but it wound up working in our favor, because suddenly all of this pent-up creativity was able to flourish, and we drafted off of the more experienced members of our team, and we were able to make the movie a lot better by basically pitching them the movie, getting their feedback or hate mail, and then going back to our office and figuring out some new stuff and pitching it back to them, and so on and so on and so on, and we made the movie better and better and better. That is kind of called incremental innovation if you're studying this kind of thing. But there's also something called disruptive innovation. And we had a scene, there's a scene in the movie that takes place in front of a Jell-O mold, and it was a picnic between Flint Lockwood, who was the hero, and his love interest, and they watched the sunset through this beautiful Jell-O mold. And part of our process is to show the movie to the editors, and the editor, who's like a kind of mean cowboy type guy, he said the most childlike thing. He was like, I want to go inside the Jell-O mold. This seems okay, but you guys are dum-dums for not going inside there. And he was totally right. It was so much better to go inside, and it totally changed the entire thinking about the movie and about this sequence. We pitched it to our visual effects supervisor, incidentally, and we said, this is going to be so great. The whole environment's going to move, and it's going to refract light everywhere. And he said, hold on. You just described the most expensive computer animated set ever devised. I don't know if we can even make it. And we said, good. That means we're onto something. And so that's an example of disruptive innovation, because it makes you rethink the entire environment, in this case, literally. And so we did this with the whole story. We threw out the idea that he was working for NASBA and was a hotshot scientist. And we started instead with something that turned out to be simpler. He's a guy who's a failed inventor who's from the little town in the story. And he desperately wants to prove himself to everybody there, because they don't understand him. They think he's a ding-dong, and all of his inventions fail. That sounds so much better. It sounds so much better. It's simpler. He doesn't have to be such a jerk at the beginning of the movie. You relate to him more. And we got almost fired again because we made this animatic, which is like all the storyboards set to soundtrack, and it was so funny, and all the crew were laughing, and everybody else was falling asleep, including the head of the studio. Very dangerous. And we were like, what are you talking about? What's wrong with this? What do you want? She goes, I want a story. And she stormed out of the room. She's a very smart lady. What she meant was, this movie was about abstractions, and movies need to be about a relationship. And we're like, oh no. Oh, I need a mental health visit. What am I gonna do? Because not only did we have to start all over again, but we had spent half the money on a movie that we were no longer allowed to make. So we had to make the movie with the assets that we had already created. That's the character designs and the environments and all that stuff. It was kind of like in the old-time studio system when they would say, like, okay, here's Douglas Fairbanks, and here's some costumes that kind of look Spanish, and we have half a pirate ship. Go make a movie. You've got 2 weeks. And so we're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix this? And then we remembered that this is a character that we created for a scene that at this point was no longer in the movie, in which Flint, the young scientist, walks into the local tackle shop for like duct tape or something, and everybody hates him, and we designed this character to be the exact opposite of him. Somebody who would be impossible to please, somebody who was unable to emote in any normal human way. And I don't know who came up with the idea, but somebody said, well, what if that guy was his dad? Wouldn't that be an interesting story? And that turned out to be another incredible disruptive innovation. By the way, the studio head's innovation was what I call a catastrophic innovation. I invented a new term. So suddenly it became a story about a young man who wants to prove himself to his father, who doesn't understand anything about his science lab or any of the stuff that the kid is passionate about, and instead wants him to work in the tackle shop. And so the movie that came out is about this kid who's like always been testing inventions on his dad, and it's always gone wrong, until one day he comes up with this invention that makes it rain food from the sky. And he's so desperate to get his father's approval that when his dad says, "Are you sure this isn't going to be a problem?" he goes, yeah, I'm sure. And of course, like, it becomes a terrible disaster and everything goes wrong. And at the end of the second act, the father, who's been, not very emotive, has to come to the son and spur him on into the third act to go save the world. And in so doing, Flint manages to prove himself to his dad and earn his father's love. My favorite part, and this is, again, I don't remember who came up with this, but this was not my idea. In the movie, there's a monkey thought translator that Flint invents, and it makes Flint look really stupid because monkeys don't have a lot of good thoughts to translate. And at the very end of the movie, the monkey puts the translator on the dad, and then the dad is finally able to say, "I love you, son. I think you're so amazing," all that stuff. And it's a really heartwarming moment, and it's proof that feelings sell movies. That's super important. So our story changed. It got a lot more emotional. It got more universal, and it had to do more with relationships than ideas, and it finally made sense. How did this happen? I'm obviously not that smart. I think it has to do with the fact that animated movies are highly iterative. And what I'm talking about is, when I talk about creating the conditions for innovation, this is what I mean: a rigorous process of iteration over and over and over again. In animated movies, there are a lot of empowered voices. That means that after I come up with this whole animatic and spend a year on it, the freaking janitor can tell me what he thinks of it. And I've had like interns and stuff be really, really hard on movies. And in the long run, it makes the movie better. The other thing that's really important in animation is the expensive part happens last. In live action movies, we shoot the whole thing and then we give it to an editor and say, "You figure it out." In animation, you edit the movie first, then you shoot it. And then, if you're me, in the sound mix, you finish writing it. And they take a long time to make, so they're allowed for all of these ideas to incubate. There are other things that use this model. In computing, there's something called agile software development, where instead of going away, taking the client's idea, spending a year making a bunch of software and coming back and saying, "Here it is," you are constantly in dialogue with the client, and you're able to make software that has the needs of the client embedded in it. We're practicing this a little bit with our new movie, which is based on the awesome toy Lego bricks. And you should applaud for Lego bricks, they're pretty awesome. But they are designed to come apart and go back together again in a way that also encourages innovation. So I'm talking about computing and the client. I should tell you this first. This is a great quote. My mom gave me this book. She's here. She gave me this book like 10 years ago. And listen to this quote: "Design in nature is but a concatenation of accidents culled by natural selection until the result is so beautiful or effective as to seem a miracle of purpose." I love this writer. I love that phrase, a miracle of purpose. You know, there's a lot of, people throw the word genius around a lot, but I want to demystify that word because I think it has to do with working really, really hard over a long period of time. This guy is talking about evolution. Specifically, he's talking about how, like, apples have been shaped by mankind over centuries to be, you know, very delicious. But he might as well be talking about stories, because when we're storytelling, we're passing the story from one person to another, either on our movie crew or around a campfire. And the good stuff stays, and the bad stuff kind of falls away, and you wind up with something that feels inevitable. And this is where my talk gets real trippy, so I'm sorry. But I did want to talk a little bit about the fact that we've been going into dark places to hear stories for 35,000 years. When in computing, you know, I was talking about the client. My client is the audience. And the audience has what's interesting is there's all this change, and I'm talking about innovation, but it's really to service something that is immutable, which is the narrative impulse of the human brain. 35,000 years ago, people like us had slightly different brains than the Neanderthals. And we were able to project ourselves into an alternate reality in order to find out whether it would kill us or not. And that's why we survived a lot longer than the Neanderthals did. I think by the Mayan calendar, we have like 6 weeks to go. But it's been a great run. But also, so that impulse, that thing that's part of our brains, makes us project narrative all over the place. It makes me project narrative onto this. I have no idea what this is. Nobody knows what this is. I think that this is about a magic snake that's defending these people from a big octopus. But I'm projecting narrative, and that's the same thing that makes animation work. To a Neanderthal brain, this is two weird rocks and another squishy rock. But to you and me, it's a parent and a child. So I'm gonna wrap up by telling you again about my favorite thing in the whole world. This has an amazingly happy ending, because this woman, she like turns herself in to the authorities. I'm so sorry. I'm the person who did this. I meant for it to be good. And then this image goes all around the world. Right? That'd be so great if somebody went to Brazil and like recarved that statue. So this goes all the way around the world and becomes this meme. And not only that, but there's a contest, and there's something called the Cecilia Prize, where you can tweet out your own revision of the fresco and see if you can make it better. Not only that, but now, yes, by the way, you're going to see this Halloween costume on the right in about a month. But so now, like, hundreds of people are flocking to this little town that never went there before to see the messed up painting. And there's a petition to preserve the messed up preservation. Why? Why? It's because, guess which one is mine? I love the Magritte one, actually. She created an accidental, disruptive innovation that changed how people were thinking about this painting. And I personally think that's a wonderful story. Thank you guys for listening to me.